I'm 38, married, and a mom of 2 boys, ages 8 and 10. My sister Fallon is 35, single, and lives just 10 minutes away. We grew up close, or at least close in the way sisters forced to share a bathroom and clothes are. She's always been the louder one, the bolder one, the one who takes jokes too far and then acts like everyone else is the problem. Fallon has what she calls an edgy sense of humor. She believes roasting people is a skill, something she's honed over the years like a party trick. She thinks it makes her the fun aunt, the cool sister. The problem is, she doesn't know when to stop, or where the line is, or that my kids aren't part of her stand-up routine. At first I brushed it off. She called me Momzilla at a Sunday dinner once when I reminded my boys to use napkins. Then it became domestic goddess, helicopter queen, and once CEO of Gold Star Parenting. It was always followed by a smirk and a laugh. Everyone laughed. I forced myself to laugh too, but it didn't stop at our family table. She started doing it at my son's birthday parties, at school events, even at my youngest soccer games. One afternoon, in front of a cluster of other parents, she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Hope your boys don't pick up your whining genes." She laughed. My son stared at the ground. The other parents looked uncomfortable. My husband pulled her aside that day and asked her to cool it. She brushed it off, told him to lighten up, that it wasn't that deep. The next week, my oldest asked me if Aunt Fallon didn't like me. I said she was just teasing. He looked confused. I tried addressing it gently. After a dinner with my in-laws, where she mocked the way I speak to my kids in front of everyone, I asked her to stop making fun of me in front of them. She gave me a smirk and said I was being too sensitive, then told me not to make everything about myself. I brought it up to our parents. My dad gave a half-hearted shrug and said she's always been like this. My mom said, "That's just Fallon," like it was a fixed part of her personality we all had to accept. So I started pulling back. I stopped inviting her over for casual dinners. I told her we were busy when she suggested brunch, but that didn't last. My parents started pressuring me to include her more. They said family was everything, that Fallon loved my kids, that she'd be hurt if I iced her out. So I gave in. We hosted a barbecue. My husband grilled. My parents came. My kids were running around with water guns. Fallon showed up late with a bottle of wine and a loud entrance. It didn't take long. While I was helping my youngest with his plate, Fallon stood behind me and mimicked the exact way I talked to my boys. Gentle voice, encouraging tone, exaggerated head tilt. Then she added, "Careful, don't bruise their delicate genius brains." Laughter from a few relatives. Some awkward smiles. My youngest dropped his plate and ran inside. Fallon didn't follow him. She didn't even ask if he was okay. She just rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, come on, it was a joke." I went inside. Found my son in his room, lying on the bed, face down. I sat next to him. He didn't say anything. That night, after everyone left, I sat with my husband in the kitchen. We didn't need to talk about it. We both knew. Fallon wasn't going to stop. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. The reactions, the attention, the spotlight, it fed something in her. Every time I laughed it off, she got bolder. Every time someone said, "That's just Fallon," she got a pass. I realized I had tried every route people usually suggest. I talked to her. I asked nicely. I set boundaries. I reduced contact. I brought in other family members. I even gave in for the sake of peace. Nothing worked. But I wasn't going to yell at her. I wasn't going to cause a scene or fight back in the same way she attacked. No, Fallon wanted drama. She wanted a reaction. I wasn't going to give her what she wanted. I was going to give her what she hated. And that would start the slowest, most infuriating revenge I could think of. One she wouldn't even be able to explain without sounding petty. Not anger. Not insults. Not silence. Something much worse for her. And I was ready. The week after the barbecue, Fallon texted me asking if we were still on for our usual Sunday brunch. I told her we weren't doing anything that weekend. No explanation. Just a clear no. That was the first time in years I'd said no to her directly without cushioning it. The next morning, she showed up at my door uninvited. My husband was in the backyard with the kids. I opened the door and told her we were having a quiet family day. She stood there like she didn't understand the words, then rolled her eyes and walked off without saying anything. I closed the door and didn't look back. I decided I wouldn't be reactive anymore. No more arguing, no more laughing along, no more "that's just Fallon." I became polite, but cold. When she made her usual jabs at a cousin's birthday party, this time about how I pack emergency snacks like a paranoid squirrel, I didn't laugh or even look at her. I just said okay and moved on. At our cousin's baby shower the following weekend, she made another dig. Something about how no one should take parenting advice from me unless they wanted to raise kids who correct your grammar mid-sentence. People chuckled. I didn't. I looked her straight in the face and said, "That's enough, Fallon." My voice was neutral, not sharp. The room went quiet. She blinked, then changed the subject. That was the first time she didn't push back. From that point on, I was intentional. If a family event was happening at our place, Fallon didn't get a personal invite. I sent one general message to the family group. She showed up anyway to a game night at our house, but looked irritated the whole time. When someone asked why she was quiet, she shrugged and said she was just tired. My mom pulled me aside at that game night. She asked if something was going on between me and Fallon. I told her I was creating space where I felt respected. She didn't respond, just blinked and walked off. The next big test came at my older son's school play. We had saved seats near the front. Fallon arrived late, made her way toward us, and tried to sit beside me. I stood up and told her there was an open seat farther down the row. She stared at me, then laughed and followed me anyway. As soon as she sat down, she raised her voice just enough to ask if we were in one of my weird moods. I didn't answer. I turned to my husband and asked if he remembered to bring the flowers for our son. Fallon sat there for a while, then got up and left halfway through the play. She didn't say goodbye. A week later, she texted me saying I'd been stiff and boring lately. I didn't reply. That silence seemed to irritate her more than anything I could have said. At a casual lunch my aunt hosted, Fallon tried again. She joked about how I run my house like it's a military school with gluten-free rations. I was holding my son's hand, helping him pick food. I didn't look at her. I just said, okay, and went back to what I was doing. After that lunch, Fallon lingered by her car in the driveway. I walked past her carrying leftovers. She asked if we were good. I smiled and said, I'm always rooting for you, Fallon, and kept walking. That moment flipped something. I could tell. She didn't know how to read it. From that point on, I noticed something strange. She stopped showing up early to things. She started arriving just on time or even late, which she never did before. At another birthday party, this time for our cousin's daughter, she made a comment about how some people overparent like it's an Olympic sport. I looked over and asked my aunt if she wanted help refilling the drinks. No reaction. No acknowledgement. She cornered me later and asked if I had a problem with her. I told her I didn't, and that I was focusing on surrounding myself with positivity. That night, I sat with my husband and mapped out the next step. Fallon had made herself the star of every room by tearing others down, so I'd give her a new role, one she couldn't tolerate. I wouldn't block her, avoid her, or argue with her. I just treat her like someone who needed a little extra care. None. Why? Like someone struggling. Like someone delicate. I knew Fallon. I knew that nothing got under her skin more than being seen as weak or pitied. If she wanted to throw digs, I'd respond with syrupy support. No, not fake smiles. Not passive aggression. Genuine, excessive, public kindness. The kind that would make her feel exposed without a single word said against her. And I'd make sure everyone was watching when I did it. The kindness started small. At a family dinner 2 Fridays after the school play, Fallon showed up in her usual dramatic fashion, wearing heels too high for the driveway and holding a bottle of wine no one asked for. She made a jab about the Pinterest-level table setting as she sat down. I waited until everyone settled and leaned over with a smile. Fallon, you must be so exhausted managing everything alone. You're doing great, though. She choked a little on her water and stared at me like I'd slapped her. No one laughed. My aunt glanced between us. Fallon didn't say anything for the rest of the meal. The next weekend, our cousin threw an engagement party. Fallon arrived fashionably late, avoided eye contact, and hovered near the food table. I beat her to it, made her a plate and walked it over before she could protest. You've had a lot on your plate lately. Just wanted to make sure you got something to eat, I said in a warm public voice. She stood frozen. A few people nearby turned to look. Then I turned to the group and added, honestly, it's amazing how Fallon keeps pushing through. She's always been strong, even when no one sees it. The expressions shifted. People started giving her the kind of looks reserved for someone going through a breakup or recovering from a personal crisis. She followed me into the hallway and asked if I was mocking her. I told her gently, no, I just think it's admirable how you manage without needing validation. She left before the cake was cut. 2 days later, my mom called asking if Fallon was okay. I told her I wasn't sure. Maybe work was getting stressful. Maybe she was overwhelmed and didn't know how to ask for help. That Saturday was my brother's birthday dinner. Fallon came. She looked tense before she even sat down. When she joked about my obsessive cleaning routines, I responded with, it's okay, Fallon. I know sometimes lashing out helps people feel in control again. The silence at the table was immediate. My brother looked up from his plate. Fallon stared at me for a long second and then didn't speak again for the rest of the night. She didn't show up to the next 2 family events. The first was my dad's mini retirement get-together. The second was a casual lunch for our cousin visiting from out of town. In both cases, she texted the group last minute with vague excuses. My mom told me Fallon wasn't feeling up to it. At my nephew's christening the following weekend, Fallon finally appeared. She walked in like she had something to prove, full makeup, expensive coat, louder than necessary. She sat at the far end of the table and stayed quiet for most of the event. When she finally spoke, it was to make a sarcastic remark about how the perfect family always takes center stage. I turned to her and said, you don't need to perform, Fallon. You're loved here, even if you're struggling. She went quiet. My aunt blinked. One cousin awkwardly shifted in her seat. When I stood up to help with the cake, I walked behind Fallon and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. It's really okay to rest sometimes. You don't have to do it all. She didn't eat the cake. She left early again. A few days later, my husband told me that his sister, who had spoken with Fallon at one of the events, said Fallon had started venting about me, said I was messing with her head, that I was trying to embarrass her. I didn't change anything. At a family friend's baby shower the next week, I saw Fallon from across the room. She was sitting alone near the drinks. I picked up a water bottle, walked over and handed it to her. Staying hydrated helps with burnout. Just looking out for you. She didn't take the bottle, just stared at it. She asked if I could stop whatever I was doing. I said I wasn't doing anything, just treating her the way I'd want to be treated if I were under stress. She didn't speak for the rest of the shower. Later that night, my mom texted saying Fallon had told her I was acting weird. I replied, maybe she's under pressure. It's not always easy being the strong one. The next weekend, we had a Sunday brunch at our place for the kids' birthdays. Fallon wasn't there. She didn't even respond to the invite. One of our cousins asked if everything was okay between us. I said Fallon had a lot on her plate, and sometimes people need space to work through things quietly. As I was helping clean up after the brunch, my oldest came up to me and asked if Aunt Fallon was mad again. I told him, she's probably just tired. Some people carry heavy things you can't always see. And then I let it be. No drama, no fights. Just kindness she couldn't stand. 2 weeks passed before Fallon showed her face again. It was a family dinner at our parents' house, something casual, just the usual crowd. She walked in like nothing had happened. I stood from the table and smiled. You made it. I was genuinely worried about you. She paused mid-step. Everyone looked her way. She gave a tight nod and sat down. The dinner was mostly quiet chatter, small updates, inside jokes. When someone told a story and Fallon didn't laugh, I leaned in and said softly, it's okay if you're not in the mood. You don't need to perform today. She glanced sideways, jaw tight. My uncle asked her how work had been. She gave a flat same old. I added, "It's impressive how you keep going even without a support system." Her eyes met mine. Sharp. Cold. She tried making a dig a few minutes later. Something about my picture-perfect routine and how I must have a color-coded schedule for breathing. I kept my voice calm. It's okay to envy something and still be kind. I get it. Silence. One cousin whispered, "Damn." Later, while clearing dishes, another cousin pulled me aside and asked what happened between us. I shrugged. She's just going through a lot. The next event was a local fundraiser our community center hosted. Fallon had signed up to volunteer. She was folding raffle tickets at a booth when I approached her with a drink, still giving even when no one gives back to you. "That's who you've always been." She didn't take the cup, just stared at it, then turned away. I made sure she was seated with a group of extended relatives who had never quite clicked with her. Not rude, just always distant. I accidentally forgot to shift the name cards. While she sat there, clearly uncomfortable, I spoke loudly enough nearby. Fallon's had such a tough few months, but she's holding it together better than most could. Her drink sat untouched in front of her the entire time. She made one last sarcastic comment before leaving, something light about helicopter parenting. I smiled. "I'm just glad you're here, even if it's hard for you." She stood, barely said goodbye, and was gone before dessert. That night, she messaged my mom, said she didn't feel included anymore. My mom called me, confused, asking if I could ease up. I told her, I'm just treating her the way I wish she treated me. Then I set my phone down and got back to helping my kids with their school projects. Fallon wanted control. She wanted an audience. But now the only spotlight she had was the one that made her look vulnerable. And I wasn't even raising my voice. Fallon stopped showing up to most family gatherings unless they were at someone else's house and quiet. If the event had more than 6 people, or took place at mine, she skipped it. No more surprise visits. No more over-the-top entrances. The next time she did show up was a birthday lunch for our cousin's toddler. Just immediate family, a few snacks, and cake. Fallon came in late, sunglasses on indoors, phone in hand. She barely spoke during the first half hour. When one of our aunts asked if she was feeling okay, I said gently, she's probably overwhelmed. She's not used to being supported. Fallon looked up like she'd been slapped. Stop acting like I'm your charity case. I didn't flinch. You don't have to feel ashamed for needing kindness. Silence. Even the toddler stopped poking his cupcake. A cousin cleared her throat and changed the topic. Later that night, my husband told me Fallon had been venting to his sister, said I was messing with her head, said I was trying to make her look crazy in front of the family. The following week, I noticed something new. People were starting to keep a bit of distance from her. Not cold, not rude, just cautious. Like they weren't sure what would set her off next. At a dinner, she snapped at someone for offering to pass her the salad. The mood shifted instantly. A few days after that, we all attended our nephew's school recital. My family had saved a row. Fallon came in late and chose a seat across the room. I waved at her. She saw me, paused, then looked away. At intermission, I walked over with a bottle of water and asked if she needed anything. She leaned in, whispered, "Are you seriously doing this here?" I smiled. "I just want you to feel seen. It's important." She stood up and walked out of the auditorium before the second half even started. My dad called the next morning, asked what I had done to Fallon. I told him, nothing hurtful. Just treating her with patience like everyone always told me to. At a family dinner the next weekend, she made another jab, this time about my kids' school being too elite for real life. I reached out, placed my hand lightly on hers, and said, "You don't need to lash out. You're loved even when you're silent." She froze, then pulled her hand back like it burned. She stood, grabbed her bag, and left without saying goodbye. No one followed her. No one called her back. She wasn't the loudest one in the room anymore. And without that, Fallon didn't seem to know what to do with herself. A week after she walked out of the recital, Fallon asked my mom if we could meet and talk things out. My mom passed along the message, and I agreed, on the condition it was somewhere neutral. We met at a quiet little cafe halfway between our houses. I got there 10 minutes early, ordered her usual drink, and placed it on the table in front of her seat. When she walked in and saw it, she stopped for a second, then sighed. "I'm not broken." I nodded. "I never said you were. I just think people who hurt others often need compassion more than anyone." She pulled out the chair slowly. "This is manipulative." I kept my tone even. "Is it manipulative to not insult you back?" She leaned forward, voice rising. "You're not better than me, you know." "I don't think I am. I just choose to stop the cycle." She stared at me for a few seconds before saying I had turned the entire family against her. I told her, "No, Fallon. You did that all by yourself." She stood up, left the drink untouched, and walked out before we even looked at the menu. 2 days later, we had a family brunch at my aunt's house. Fallon showed up wearing a bright floral dress and a forced smile. She sat at the far end of the table and avoided looking in my direction. Midway through, she made a joke about another cousin's parenting. Something about using iPads as babysitters. The table went quiet for a beat. I looked up and said, "Let's try not to project today, all right?" No one laughed. Someone changed the subject within seconds. Fallon went quiet again. Later, as I helped my youngest pour juice, I noticed Fallon staring at me from across the room. She wasn't glaring. She looked unsure, like she didn't know who I was anymore. That afternoon, I saw her walk out alone while others were still lingering. No goodbye, no snide remarks. She had always relied on words, on knowing the perfect insult, the perfect joke. But now they landed flat, and with every flat landing, she was realizing no one needed her to speak anymore. Her power had never been her personality. It had been everyone's willingness to accept her version of it, and I wasn't playing that part anymore. After that brunch where Fallon's words landed like a brick in water, everything went quiet. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't ask how she was doing. Her name didn't come up around my kids. No one brought her up in group chats. Nothing. A month passed. During that time, we had 2 family get-togethers, a baby shower, and my husband's birthday dinner. Fallon skipped both. No excuse, no heads up, just silence. One night, during dinner at my place, my mom mentioned Fallon while refilling her plate. I didn't answer. I topped off her glass and changed the subject. The only time Fallon reappeared was at my older son's science fair. She stood in the back of the room, behind the last row of folding chairs. Didn't say much, didn't take photos, just watched. When the fair ended, she walked over to my son and told him, "Good job." He nodded, polite but unsure. His eyes flicked toward me. I walked up slowly. "Thanks for coming." That meant a lot to him. She nodded again, eyes somewhere over my shoulder. She looked like she wanted to say something, but her mouth closed without a word. Then she turned and walked out the door. That was the last time she showed up to anything connected to us. A few weeks later, my cousin called and said Fallon had skipped their annual girls' weekend. Just said she didn't feel like being around people who fake being nice. I didn't respond, just let the silence do the work. Eventually, even the relatives who tried checking on her stopped mentioning her altogether. One cousin said she barely answered texts. Another said Fallon was distant and kept to herself. One night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, my mom looked up from the sink and said, "You know, she hasn't insulted anyone in months." I smiled. Sometimes silence is what growth sounds like. Family events feel different now. Lighter. My kids laugh freely. Conversations don't tiptoe. No one glances over their shoulders mid-sentence. And I never had to raise my voice. I didn't block her. I didn't yell. I didn't punish. All I did was stop dancing around her cruelty. And in that quiet, the power she once had faded.